Okay, we're continuing halacha. Thank you for the recognition. Before we get to actually looking at the din itself, tell you what the following. There's a Mishnah that says, you're allowed to eat honey that you got from a goy. Okay, the whole second paragraph, as we've talked about, the whole second paragraph, there's all kinds of things that you are or not allowed to eat foods from goy, all different kinds of things. So the Mishnah says you're allowed to eat honey, and it's clear in the Gemara that comes right afterwards that the Mishnah is not talking about honey straight from the hive, it's talking about cooked honey. Okay, the Gemara asks Kashrus and says things that make it clear that it's talking about honey that was cooked. Okay, so Mei Devash says you're allowed to eat cooked honey. You're allowed to eat this cooked honey. He says, I don't understand. Didn't we learn this Gemara that we talked about last time that says that you're now to eat shecher from a goy? He says, didn't the Gemara say you're now to eat shecher? So why is this any different? How come if you're now to drink shecher, how come you're allowed to drink this cooked honey thing? What's the difference between the cooked honey meaning a cooked honey drink? What's the difference between drinking a drink made with cooked honey versus drinking shecher that the Gemara says like that? Okay, so the Rosh has two answers. Okay? The answers are not going to be not changing his mind on what's clear from what the Rosh is saying is that the fact that the honey is not alcoholic didn't bother him. The Gemara says you're not drink shecher. We saw 2 times ago that shecher, that the literal translation, at least Lashon HaTorah, means something that's from the shaker, that makes you, that's intoxicating. Okay? But the Rosh wasn't bothered by it. The fact that the Gemara says you're not drink shecher, the Rosh says, wait a second, so why are I drink a beverage made out of honey? Well, why are I drink that thing? His Teavanna don't say, no, that's alcoholic and that's not alcoholic. His Teavanna, whatever his Teavanna. So, no, the Gemara didn't say, there's no right in the Gemara, when the Mishnah says you're allowed to drink honey, it didn't say that you're allowed to drink meat, it says you're allowed to drink cooked honey. And he says it's a cheshbon from the Gemara, it's a cooked honey beverage. So, when he could have answered this, the Mishnah is talking about one that's not alcoholic, and I'm talking about one, and the Gemara says shecher means an alcoholic one. No, so in fact, that's how I was going to bring in for you. I have a recipe for it. I was going to make it. Because I don't drink coffee or alcohol. A recipe from the 1500s for drink. It was roughly ginger ale. Okay, always in our imagination anyhow. Of things that they used to make. They call it Mei Devash. Okay, and when the Mishnah says you like to drink Devash or cooked Devash in a beverage, let him just say this is this and this is that. It's 2 different things. Okay, and furthermore, the fact that that he's talking about a non-alcoholic honey is also like this. The Beis Yosef, when he brings this in, the Beis Yosef is in 2 stages. The first thing the Beis Yosef says is, he says, the Goyis Hashri say, and others, the Goyis Hashri on this rush, the Hagah on that rush, says, you're allowed to drink honey. You're allowed to drink cooked honey. He argues on this. And the Rosh argues that, no, you're not allowed to drink this honey, this cooked honey beverage. First he brings that machlokas, he goes, the Goyis Hashri says it's mutter, and the Rosh says it's us. And then he says, and there's some Rishonim who say that you're allowed to drink anything that's not shecher tomorrow. And other Rishonim disagree about that also. Okay, so it's 2 different shilas. One shilah is, one shilah he talks about is it only for alcoholic beverages or also for non-alcoholic also? That's one thing. And then the second shilah is it only shecher tomorrow or is it all other things also? Okay, it's 2 different things. Okay, and if you look at the way the Torah and the documentary talk about this thing, look at the listing of how they say it. They say shecher tomorrow mashal so'arim, v'chein mashka ha'asem midvash. Or the documentary shecher shotua, v'gam mashka ha'asem midvash. Meaning the shecher, there's different kinds of shechers. Those are what we would call beers or things like that. And then a mashka that you make from dvash, not alcohol. It's a different kind of a thing. It's not the same thing. Okay, so
I don't see why someone says it's here.
Someone says the Rosh, I think it's a beer. The what? That's right. No, it's not. Yeah, okay. The way that they say it brings it as 2 different shilas. This is 2 different shilas. A shilah about Devash, is that mutter? Hagoyis Hashri in the Rosh, that's one shilah. Look at the second shilah. What about other things that are not other alcoholic beverages made from farm and things like that? Isn't that one big shilah? If it's alcohol, if it's meat, it's all one big shilah.
Different people discuss it.
No, he doesn't bring the matir and the ocean. He is mutter aser. It's 2 different shilas. It's like I said, 2 different things.
People discuss different applications.
Oh, no, I don't know. If it's stated,
honey drink was alcoholic,
This was alcohol.
then you're
It's not, you know,
So
what you're saying.
that's why I didn't bring in for you. That would have made you feel better if I would have.
But is that true?
You?
Is that true? The standard honey drink was alcoholic? Is that,
I have no reason to think so. I have no.
well, it's an alcoholic. You have no idea. Because they probably went to me in 1500, so it means it was an alcoholic.
So when the Mishnah says Devash, that means it's mead.
Everything. The alcohol, and alcohol. Whatever.
oh, then you're back to saying like
No, so then so the Rosh says
Everything.
when the Rosh says when the Mishnah says it's mutter. No. So the Rosh says so the reason why the Mishnah says it's mutter is because it's talking about non-alcoholic, and what's usher is the alcoholic one. What I'm saying.
They no chiluk. You didn't see a chiluk. You didn't see alcoholic or non-alcoholic in the chiluk.
That's what I'm making my point. That the Rosh holds that when the Gemara says shecher is usher, it means even non-alcoholic beverages. That's what he's saying there. If he thinks they're the same.
It's too unclear. We're based on history.
Now this is basing. Why did the Rosh say that? So you say because it was so positive. When the Mishnah said honey, it obviously must have meant meat.
I don't know what they had. It's hard to...
Okay. So now, to me, maybe you'll be so happy then to see what I'm about to show you. To me, then it's a surprise because when we look in Shulchan Aruch, okay, it's different in the Shulchan Aruch than the way it says in the Torah basis. Okay, look what the Shulchan Aruch says. It is called shecher shel kusim, shecher shel tamarim, or shel ta'enim, or shel sa'arim, or shel tvu, or shel dvash. Okay, that's how we would have expected it to say. Okay, when the Chacham brings it, they call it a shecher shel dvash. Okay, as opposed to the Torah and the Taki Moshe and the Rosh who talked about mashke she'osim mitvash, something that you make out of dvash. As opposed to, they're not saying a mash you make out of dvash, it's a different kind of shecher. You make shecher and all the different types of things. Look at Ramah. V'yesh b'chem b'shecher shel dvash v'tvur. There's different ways of making shecher. Okay, the way the Chacham calls it, shenikra mead. Okay, that's it. Shenikra mead. And put on screen. That's shenikra mead. Okay, which is what we would expect. Okay, this is we back from our old screens like that. That's what mead is. Okay, mead is when you ferment honey, you end up with mead. Okay, so that's from our 2 times honey screens. So to me that I thought the Rosh was saying even non-alcoholic, and to be especially clear about that child. To me, he's clearing that child. What you do about non-alcoholic beverages is including this issue of shecher, or is it not included? So why didn't the Mechaber tell us? Like, why does the Mechaber leave us? He tells us the din, but this case, what about if it was not alcohol? Okay, so to me that was just odd. Okay, now the Ramaz might make about everything, but to me that's a little strange.
It says it speaks after the debates whether it applies to non-alcoholic beverages.
He doesn't say the word non-alcoholic. But first he brings this shaila about dvash, about mashke she'osim mitvash.
And then he's clearing it applies to the alcoholic beverage and dvash.
So why is it 2 different shailas? I don't say why is that. There's mekilim and there's machmirim. So okay,
but why does he ask it again?
so this is shecher shel dvash. So the Mechaber holds.
You're trying to say that no, it's no problem. Everything stems.
Right. And here's why.
No, but the Mechaber.
All they're discussing is alcoholic beverage.
I understand, but why is Mechaber matter?
He's
And
machmir.
why does he ask it? Why does he ask? The Rosh is matter.
No, because the Hagosh is machmir. So he says Hosea to other Rishon.
Does that make sense? There's a stem with the Hadabes Yosef.
The flow of the Beis Yosef, because the second part of the Beis Yosef says all shecher. The second part of the Beis Yosef says every kind of shecher is also not just shecher, but all shecher. So this would stem the way we would understand why he should say this case. Shecher shel dvash, we understand why he should make it also. He's not telling us what he thinks about non-alcoholic honey beverage.
Dvash shaila that the Rosh is discussing, which is matter.
Which the Rosh is matter, we don't see it in Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch is not telling us what. That to me is odd. Well, tell me what you think about that then. Is that what does it?
Or he is discussing it.
Right.
Okay. You're saying he's discussing it and he's being machmir. Yeah, he's being machmir. I'm saying there's a stem with the Beis Yosef.
Well, he's for sure machmir on shecher shel dvash. That I know.
Who asks?
Does he
do the Beis Yosef usually the Rosh
we think you'd follow the Rosh? That's good.
Or you would say, yeah, you make machlokes out of it at least.
Right.
Get that wrong.
Right. Okay. So. Okay.
That's like the Beis Yosef over the Rosh.
He brings the machlokes and he passes.
He doesn't bring the machlokes. He just says it's Teavana.
And it's sinister. This is Teavana.
Right. So okay. But let's. So the.
You're saying he's not passing like that. You're saying he's passing like his mother.
And he's not saying. To me, I'm saying that the Shulchan Aruch is not telling us what he thinks about non-alcohol, or maybe it's not by non-alcohol.
That's what you're saying.
Okay, maybe you could say that. I didn't think it like that, but that could be. Okay, so now if I was right, that non-alcoholic dvash would be usher according to the Rosh, so what's the limit then? We used to think the limit was, until a few minutes ago, you thought the limit was it has to be alcoholic beverages. if it includes even non-alcoholic Mei Devash, what's the end? How far does it go? What? So everything? Every beverage is also? When the Gemara says Sheikha means everything? So I thought that Hag Gufa is what was why the Rosh said the din. Remember last time I told you, the Rosh says something that has no makar in the Gemara. He just says it as if it's pasha to him. Remember what he says is that the only time it's usher to drink is if you're kaveh atzmei lishtos. If the person is there, if you happen to be going there because you're thirsty, that's not usher at all. And the Gemara doesn't say that. He makes up a new call that the Gemara never said, that if you're going just because you have to be thirsty, then it's okay. So what I thought was, the Russian understanding, the reason why the Gemara picked on the word shecher, even though Rush hold that includes even the non-alcoholic, is because not because of the shecher, the alcohol shaboy, but the type of the way you drink this thing. When you sit down to drink shecher, when you sit down to drink a beer, you're not thirsty, you're drinking because you're enjoying the whole, it's an experience. You're enjoying sitting and having this drink. And so other things, if Mei Devash is a thing like that also, well, that would also be included. What happens if you just go in because you're thirsty, you want orange juice and you want to drink, then that's not included. So the wine, it's not everything. It's Chol Gufa is what the Rosh said last time. That the Rosh says that it's things that are, when people drink them because they're sitting down to have a drink, rather than just because they're thirsty. That was where the Rosh came up with this thing that said that things like that are
Yeah, but Mechaber is Mekel.
the Mechaber is
Mekel.
Mako, for what?
If you think the Rosh had to come up with this rule of the Shikasa, non-alcoholic beverages are also.
Right.
So then why the Mechaber class?
So then the Mechaber wouldn't hold like that. I think if the Mechaber, well, he didn't tell us what he thinks about Mei Devash. Yossi's being dying, so he needs to see Mako, so then he didn't have to say it. Okay, that's a fair question. Okay, maybe it's not told. Okay, so now, that leads us to Chacham. Okay, Chacham, last time I told you, Chacham said, so I'm going to bring to you on the screen in a second, just I don't distract you for a second. The Chacham says that the Ikra is, or the minig is to be Mekel, like the Ramah, that we could eat shecher of anything except for shecher tomorrow. But he says you should be machmir. The Baal Nefesh should be machmir. I'm going to show you in a second. The Baal Nefesh should be machmir for the Shittas HaMachaber. He brings it. You'll see in parentheses from the Beverages, who says you should be machmir for the Shittas HaMachaber. He says, but he says, that's in the first paragraph. He says, but all of that only applies, as the Pri Chodesh says. The Pri Chodesh talks about whether it applies to alcoholic beverages or even non-alcoholic beverages. He says, so it's a good idea that you should be machmir, for a Baal Nefesh should be machmir. He says, v'chein, coffee and chocolate. Okay, chocolate, we eat nowadays chocolate in like bars of chocolate. Okay, but in those days, when chocolate was first brought to Europe, the way people ate it was as hot chocolate. Okay, it was a beverage that people drank. So it was like coffee and chocolate. People drank it. It was like a coffee shop and a chocolate shop. Really, it's mutter to drink it because we're only machmir. Even he saying for Baal Nefesh should only be machmir for alcoholic beverages. But I'm going to say in Harabim that we saw all kinds of problems from people who hang out in these places and end up interacting with Goyim. So it leads to all kinds of problems, and therefore a person should avoid these kind of things, which is along the lines I told you last time from the Rashba. The whole feeling of the Chacham is like the Rashba who says this whole din of shecher is not a din that Chacham imposed on us. That people realize that it led to all kinds of problems, and people on their own realize they should stay away and avoid these kind of foods, these kind of interactions with Goyim, we're eating in their places. So nowadays, the thing that people interact with, of course, the Baal Nefesh should avoid the alcoholic beverages, going to bars, but also you should avoid going to coffee shops and the coffee chocolate shops, because it leads to the same kind of problems. Okay, so from this, there are those who said that a person should, the same din, not only should a person should be machmir, like the Chacham Tzaddik says, to be machmir with the Shittas HaMachaber, to not drink in a bar, in a non-Jewish bar, should I say, or in a guy's house. Not only should he be machmir for those kind of things, but the person should even be machmir to not go to coffee shops. Okay, what is a coffee shop for us? Okay, now in the past, 10, 20 years, there's a very common thing. Starbucks is that's a coffee shop, and people go there and they hang out. Okay, they sit there.
Coffee shops are the same. Base Akum is
there's a relationship with the owner. You go to the counter, you buy something, you sit at your table, you have no shaykhs to the table next to you.
So I don't know. The din is the makam mechirasa. Mechirasa in a bar doesn't mean that I know the guy.
No, look at it. You know, it's like the Bishul Akum comes to Ramosh. There's a shaykhs with the Mevashel. We have no shaykhs to the
I don't know if the shaykhs is only from the cellar or if it's a place where people sit down and they drink. So
a bar to a Starbucks.
So I was clear about that. Well, if we would think that what the Chacham Sodom is saying is to treat it exactly like you treat the Isser Shecher. The Isser Shecher is even by yourself. It's Mukach from the Gemara. Even the Shecher, even for the guy to sit by himself on his own little table and eat it, once it was Usher, you're not allowed to do that. So if he means it literally to take it like that Isser, then you can't sit at the table and drink by yourself either. Okay, if that's what in the case of the Gemara, to drink Shecher, you couldn't drink even by yourself. But if he meant it just as from the interaction side of it,
that's not the Chanuz we're talking about.
That's not the Chanuz? Why is it not the Chanuz? Why is that in?
The Chanuz in those days was a different Chanuz.
That's exactly what goes on in Starbucks. People sit down and they sit with each other.
Is it the server? Is it
The server is not to get in front of the smartphones.
Yeah, car, we went to the table.
No, because it's not true. Because it's a social place. It's a social place, and the Gemara says. Right. That's right. That's you don't have to know, but it's a social place. So the Gemara says that in the base mechiras you can't even drink by yourself. So if it's a social type of place, it is, and if Starbucks is, so then you can't. If this issue would apply to that, you wouldn't be allowed to eat by yourself either. Not just that you can't eat with the guy or with the seller. It's that kind of a place. But all you can say is no. The Chacham just said was we should keep that in mind if I go to these kind of places. So don't go with someone who's not Jewish and sit down in the Starbucks and eat with them. Then that would be in mind. But if you're sitting by yourself, so technically it's not also, it's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, Shecher, this chumrah to be choishish, maybe it'll lead to social interactions. What's the problem? I'm sitting by myself.
Well, perhaps it's only the Latayat Mamish. They're realized, not an in or a... No, but
it could be he means that.
We don't know. We just made it up. The Chacham was a mess on his own.
Right. So the Chacham is telling us to keep this whole thing in mind, not just for the technicality, but for expanded cases also. You know?
Okay. I don't know how we could extrapolate, because last week you were mentioning you have Bishul Akum, you have Pas Akum, you have now Mashkos and everything, and the Chazal made a certain Xeris, but we don't know why they made the Xeris the way they made it. For example, Bishul Yisrael. So what sense does it make that it could be cooked by a Yid, but then you could socialize with someone else eating? So we don't really understand what was behind the different Xeris. So therefore, when they made a Xerah like this, they didn't say, to go further, the next step. Here you're going the next step.
You're right. So by the technicalities of not doing anything wrong. The Chacham Sodom is saying is, but the reason why they asked it is because of the interactions it brings to, and we're smart enough, so you don't have to
extrapolate.
Right, that's 100%. So he's not saying that it's the technicality of the issue. He's saying it's me as a community rabbi. It's not a good idea. Right, that's what he's saying. So he says,
but you can't say.
What does he say? I can call Asher Borech Torah Yarch Nizeh. The person, so he's not saying Asher. So you should
back to what I was saying. Do we have any idea? Like what was behind the Xeris of Bishul Yisrael?
What do you mean? Basic reason.
It says Mishum Kashrus, so it doesn't make sense. So you have a Yid who is cooking it, and then you're allowed to eat it together with the guy.
Right.
It's a very
Actually,
you don't get to be involved in the cooking is automatically a barrier.
It's a mental.
You can put in a kissim also.
So why did they go ahead and do the same Xerah like they did with Mashkos? You can't socialize.
That's a good question. Okay.
That would be more effective.
Because some people go to Starbucks and don't drink anything, and just go to meat or whatever.
Right. Okay. So you should know. Rabelsky once talked about it. Indian person drinking like in a rest stop. Okay, so there, I don't understand the connection because in the rest stop case, if the guy's going to make himself for thirst, just he needs a drink. He's not parking himself and making a whole scene out of it. That rush, the Chacham will tell us to be making about the Kesinia. But his point was, he says, when we want to be machmir for the Chacham Zadam, if your person wants to be machmir for this Chacham Zadam, it means is in a social type setting. Meaning, the Chacham Zadam didn't mean to say we should treat it exactly like they did and all the technicalities of it, like you can't eat by yourself. If the guy wants to eat by himself, so eat by himself. Like, what's the difference? Do I take a Starbucks and I go home? So, according to the technicalities of it, you can't eat it all the way to get home. So can I take it to God's eyes? He was looking at it as that you have to just take it for what it is, that the concern is the socialization. So if I sit down by myself, or I sit down with another Yid, we're sitting eating together, so maybe we shouldn't be so worried about it. Okay. So let's now move on. Let's move on. Naniach that it was mutter to eat in the Starbucks, so you could take the food home. Like the Rosh says, one of the Rosh's answers that I didn't tell you, one of the Rosh's answers was when the Mishnah says you're allowed to drink Devash. What the Mishnah meant was, of course you're going to follow the rules like the Gemara is going to say. You can take it home. Okay, so that's what we're talking now. Whether you could drink the stuff in Starbucks, like that terrace in the Rush, that it means is however it's mutter. Either mamish you think it's mutter to drink in the store, or you can take it home. Okay, so like this. I'm going to do this sort of quickly. Okay, and that is like this. In the person wants to drink in Starbucks. Lots of people want to go to Starbucks. So the simplest thing is there are some things that you can't drink them because we don't know if the ingredients are kosher. Okay, the ingredients themselves are kosher. Okay, the one that used to get the people the most, which is not the question anymore, was frappuccinos. But the base that they made it out of was they didn't know if it was kosher. Okay, it so happens that at this point they already know that they're kosher. Okay, but there are toppings and all kinds of fun other things, lemonade. There's a few things here and there. Mom is only a handful now that the ingredients themselves are ones that we have questions about. Those ingredients make us think you can't drink them. Okay,
Lemonade's trafe.
What do you say?
Lemonade's trafe.
Trafe? Okay.
Trafe juice.
Okay, so there are ones that maybe we can know that they're mamish trafe. Okay, let's see. But that's not the biggest part of the question. There's a couple of things that people would have to avoid. The bigger part is that the coffee shop is more than just a coffee shop, and it's turned into like a mini restaurant. Okay, and what really makes problems for us is that they serve sandwiches, and not only do they serve sandwiches, but they serve hot sandwiches. They take the sandwiches, they stick them into this oven. Usually the sandwiches have meat and chicken and all kinds of for the chazarai, and they therefore they're heating up that stuff. They heat it up on plates, and there's actually a plate that sits in the oven itself, that stays there all the time, and then those get washed with our kelim. Okay, so the shaylas that we have are, of course, no one's going to eat the sandwiches. Of course, I should mention that. Of course, those things don't have hashkafa on them. Like sandwiches and cakes and things like that don't have hashkafa. But the shaylas, do they affect everybody else? Do their presence and the fact that they were made hot then get washed together, everything else, does that make shaylas for the kelim? Okay, so before we talk about some of the details, just some of them, there's three different ways to approach that question. Before we talk about the actual questions, the blias. One approach was to say, let's look at the din. Whatever the din says, some things that make blias that are usher, some things that blias that are mutter. Not everything that's a potential blia really is enough to make something treif. So whatever the din is, this is going to be mutter, this is going to be us. That was one approach to look at it and say, we'll look at each shilah separately, and either it's mutter or it's usher. That was one approach. Okay. Rabbi Schwartz said, we should not take that approach. Okay? Rabbi Schwartz said, no, we're hashkacha. We have to tell people to go a higher road. We have to tell them what's really okay and what's really not okay. And anything that has even a bits of shilos to it is not what we want to tell people they should be eating. Okay? They will turn to us to find out, kulas based on this and cheshbonis and this and that. What? So Rabbi Schwartz says, tell them, we have to tell them the way when we tell them something is good, they know they can trust us that it's perfectly good. That was Rabbi Schwartz's way of looking at it, which is what we do. And the Starkei took a little bit of a different approach. They also want to go on they say, we're hashkach, we tell you what's right. But at the same time, they tell you, if it's a shasat chag, the person's on the road, they're stuck, these are the things you could do, meaning that they're
Rabbi Yehuda is not talking about stuff.
When you're on the road,
it's a major tradition from Rabbi Feinman's Taich in the night of Yehuda, but he holds anytime you're driving, you're mutter to drink any of these things because of the night of Yehuda.
Because what?
What's the night of Yehuda? He said it?
Because I didn't say it. No. I said because
No. Anytime you're on the road, you're allowed to. It's called shasat chag.
That's what I said. So he's telling you that these are situations that you could be makel, even though it's not perfectly without shilas, but you could be makel because
what I was trying to clarify is that it's not your shasat chag. Being on the road is tight shasat chag.
Okay, the same thing. The point is that he's saying, as this is now not saying, I as hashkacha only tell you what's perfectly beautiful. I, as a community rabbi, can tell you that you should be makel in this case. Okay, so it's not completely saying, this is what's mutter nasser. It's like in between to say, this is what you should really, this is as a hashkacha, I should tell you what's right. And me, as a rabbi, will tell you, well, I said this is what you should do. Okay, so that's just different approaches to how to take this off. Okay, so now, and one more set of instructions, before I tell you what the detail of the Shaila is, that we're going to make two hanachas. Okay, in our thinking this through, we're going to make two hanachas. The first is that if we have something that the only thing treif about it is that it has a flavor that we don't know if the flavor is kosher or not, if we don't know about the flavor, we won't recommend that item. You can't have it if you don't know if the flavor is kosher, but that won't treif up the kalim. Okay, there's a long-standing shita. It's not really for now, but we make an assumption that if something has a flavor that we don't know if it's kosher, then we don't eat it, but it won't treif up the kalim. Okay?
If it was treif.
If the flavor was treif, we have to think that more carefully. Second is that we make an assumption. We talked about it when we learned Simikuf Tezvav. That if something is made on kalim where chalav stam was made on those kalim, you're allowed to eat that. You could eat that. You, a person who only eats chalav yisrael, can eat that thing that's made on there. Now, not everybody agrees with that. That's why we talked about in Kuf Tezvav. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't agree with that. They're agree if you eat chalav akum on a kli. But we taking an assumption that what we're going to say is going to make an assumption that just because something is made on kalim that were chalav stam, but it was kosher, you're allowed to eat things made on those kalim. You can't eat it with fleishigs because it's milk, but you could eat it as in by itself. You could eat it. That's an assumption that we're making, an assumption that not everybody agrees to that assumption. Okay.
CRC okay as being, like if you see a CRC half shell, something could it be made in dairy equipment?
No. Well, we call it dairy equipment. Well, for the simple reason that it would be milk. Okay, that would be for the simple reason. But no, even off the chalav stam shema, no, we would not do that. We wouldn't do it. But what would I do in my house, or what would a person do privately? Say, could you eat something made on chalav stam kalim? So then these assumptions I'm making that yes, it's okay to eat things made on chalav stam kalim. In other words, I'm going to Starbucks and I'm the hashgacha. Can I eat that? Okay, so there's a few parts. Okay, there are two places in the store that are kli rishon. Okay, in Blias, we don't care only how hot something is. We care if it's a kli rishon or kli sheni. There are two things that are kli rishon. That is the oven. And something like that makes the sandwiches in it. That makes these plates and the tray that's in there a kli rishon tray as a kli rishon. And the other kli rishon is a wand in a machine. A wand, okay, that makes, and then the espresso bar. Espresso is a concentrated coffee. Okay, that's not the problem yet. Concentrated coffee, but together with that concentrated coffee called an espresso, there's a thing that steams up beverages, particularly milk. Okay, people like to steam up milk. And what you do is you take a cup full of your apple juice or your usually milk, stick it into a wand, and the wand blows steam into the thing to puff it up, place, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so that wand is a kli rishon. Okay, there's steam pouring right out of it, and your beverage is being cooked right in that thing, so to speak, being cooked in that. Okay, so those are the two places where there's a kli rishon. A kli rishon, of course, is what really makes blias. Okay, most of the other things that are in there, most other ways for the tam to potentially transfer are either Iru Kli Rishon or Kli Sheni. The difference is that if something's only Iru Kli Rishon, it only is Mavli K'tei Klipa, it has a very small amount of blue that it could transfer in. And if it's a Kli Sheni, then we're Machmir L'Chatchila, but if a Kli Sheni, B'diavad is not going to make something treif. Okay? If something's in a Kli Sheni, we would L'Chatchila wouldn't want to do it, but B'diavad it's not going to make the food treif. Okay, so a big point of contention, I'll pass it, but I'm not going to talk to you the whole details. A big point of contention was the things that are Ibri are there's a dish machine. It's called. Okay, it's not really a dishwasher. It's a sterilizing machine. It's a dish machine and a sink. Okay, and the sink is a 3-compartment sink. Those are all have potentially as an Ibri.
And about every place or specifically Starbucks?
This is how Starbucks runs. Most other places have roughly the same idea, give or take. So each one needs to be thought about separately. But Starbucks is pretty similar all over the place. They have their way that they run. Thank you for mentioning, because I forgot to mention, I should have said, that there's two types of Starbucks. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. There's the full Starbucks that make the sandwiches like I just told you about. And then there's what we call the kiosks. Okay, I think we made up that word. Kiosk, which is is it their word? Is their term? Okay, a kiosk is a little Starbucks. Okay, tends to be like just in another store or something like that. And those kiosks don't serve sandwiches. That's enough gamina. If they don't serve these hot sandwiches,
many of them stars.
Well, then we don't call them kiosks.
They're already made.
Who cares if they have a whole bar?
Make them then, maybe.
Who cares if they have a whole bar?
Then there's no.
They have a sink. They have a sink. The sink is a more serious item than the whole bar is. So there's a long-standing argument. We had somebody call to save me, but
and a lot of kiosks Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So then we wouldn't call them kiosk. In our terminology, we would call them. It's not, no, they're not charity. We don't care if they make it. No, dumb, but they serve it to you hot. They take the sandwich, put it into the oven, and heat it up for you.
What does Hope Bar mean?
It's brand name. It's a dishwasher. Okay, it's not a dishwasher. It's like a dishwasher. You put the thing. It's for sterilization. The dishes are clean. You put them in and you sterilize them in there. So we're I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this before. We're machalik between the ones that serve the hot sandwiches and the ones that don't. They don't serve the hot sandwiches. Then these bliya shilas are almost nothing. There's almost no bliya shilas.
You don't know Kashrus that they took kalim from a different Starbucks or anything like that.
No, not at all. No, that's not chashash. Okay, so in the sinks and this dish machine, they're irui klivishin, or maybe even a klisheni. But the question is, so we say, okay, well, irui klivishin potentially can make something treif. It's not easy to make something treif with irui klivishin, but potentially. So the question was like this: the sink is what's called a 3-compartment sink. The first sink, it's a sink that has 3 sections. So the first section always has soap in it. So people said, well, if the first section always has soap in it, then it was pagan any bliyas that are in the kli. You don't have to worry about it anymore. The next sections don't have soap in them. We don't have to worry about that. That was a chazanish we talked about a long time ago, not for today. But that we assume that that's not correct. Okay? You can't be pagan into something. Okay? The way we pagan things for making any binyarmin is its own shaila. We talked about it in Hagal's Kelim. But we assume that you can't be pushed pigim in and make it pagan for good. So even if today I wash it in the soapy water, if the next sink over is a regular water, then it has a chashash. But again, it's only a chashash of a klisheni. Okay, so klisheni is only something min hadin, but only is a lachatila. You shouldn't do it. You can't make it. Why would you say? Because you put water into the sink, and then you dunk the dishes in. Even if you did irui, what would be the irui? Irui is only when the water, exactly what the water hits to. So the water can't hit the treif kli and the kosher kli at the same time. The blade can't get from the treif to the kli. So let's say, the treif kli had irui klivishin. So who cares? The treif kli was treif beforehand. The kosher kli irui klivishin, nothing happened to it. How did the blade get from the treif kli to the kosher kli? So you can't just read irui, it's only in the kli. After the water settles, now the tom could potentially transfer. So don't do it. But the evidence is not going to make it. No, it's a sink. It's a sink like in your kitchen. Yeah, but the water, the clean not sitting in the sanitizer. They're sitting on a rack, and the water's just shooting at them. So that's irui. When water shoots from one place to another place, that's irui. So water gets heated up over here, and it gets squirted over there. That's irui.
180.
Yeah, it's irui.
The sink is what?
I don't know, a little less, but they're irui. Okay, so the most the shiloh that's the least shiloh, which for some people is the most practical, but it's the least shiloh, is where they actually just a plain black coffee, and that's because the only potential shiloh is a piece of metal called a brew basket. When you brew coffee, you're dripping hot water through the ground up coffee. What they call the coffee grinds. So the water goes through the coffee, and then the coffee is sitting on a paper filter, just like in a coffee machine here, on a paper filter, and what holds that together in the machine is this metal frame, a frame that holds the whole thing together. So think of I should have had a picture for you, of a frame of metal holding a paper filter on which is ground up coffee, and the coffee drips through. So let's say that our frame was kosher, what we call the brew basket. Let's say that piece of metal was kosher, was treif. Let's say it got treif even in the washing machine. Let's even be kosher. How would the blade get from that piece of metal into my drink? What does it have to do to get into my drink? So it has to go through the paper and the grinds into the water that's dripping through. Okay.
The water is passing through once it goes to the grinds and the filter, then it passes through the basket.
No, it doesn't. The basket is holding the paper from a distance. Okay, it's holding it, most of the water doesn't touch it. It's not a full thing. It's just like a frame. And even were it to touch it, it would be touching as a klisheni. It's been dribbling through the coffee grind, so it's touching this klisheni. So
the basket?
what? Let's say the basket was because it was washed in the machine together with the.
You already said the cleaning is not. Doesn't change it.
The worst case scenario that the basket. Right. Even if it will be what? No, it goes for 2 minutes. It goes for
one coffee to the other.
No, it doesn't go one coffee after the other. They make coffee until they sell all that coffee. Then an hour later,
It does get the metal itself goes very hot from it becomes a double goosh almost.
Yeah, come on. We have a gallon of water is pouring through coffee grinds. So how hot is the metal going to get? I don't mean it can't get hot, but it's an even for 5 minutes water pours through it. That's not enough to make it into a
It's
cleavage.
very hot, the metal.
I don't disagree that it gets hot.
Stay there. And if the coffee grinds stay in the basket, do they empty it out right away, or they just stay there?
Stays there.
So it's
So
maybe
who cares?
what they call the Erev Shabbos.
No, it's not.
Or Gush, or Gush.
When the coffee grinds are there, there's no more coffee there. I don't care. So the coffee grinds are treif. They go in the garbage. They go in the garbage.
Well, if it's treif coffee grinds sitting on a tray, then it makes the basket treif.
We assume the basket was treif. It was from the washing machine, dishwasher. So how's it going to make the coffee treif? The coffee's going to drip through. So half an hour later, what?
They use it once, and then the next.
Of course, you throw the filter in the garbage and the grinds in the garbage. When it's time to make a new pot, they put up a new thing. So it's hard to imagine that could become treif. And for the person who's in the more desperate state, I'm talking about the person who has all kinds, who can pronounce all the words to describe what kind of drink he wants. So the guy who says, "Can I have a coffee?" That person, the brew basket has the least shadows. Okay, but then the thing that we love to tell people is this is a espresso machine. I mentioned before that makes these concentrated drinks that has no shadows because it gets washed in place. It doesn't go into the dish machine and to the sink.
Size of the shot divider.
What's that? Here, Shabbos, here, Starbucks.
Okay, so
1 second, the brim.
good question. So okay, so.
He's already looked at it.
I didn't say. I said silence. Yes.
The reason you're saying that is that what's called the brewing machine, which has the sleeve of the milk?
The one that's special machine. That's the one in the bars.
So the only reason why it's not a problem is because you're saying that dairy equipment is not.
In the one part of it, the part that makes the shots, all it does is just make coffee. That's all it does, makes coffee.
No, man, if I want to be marked by dairy equipment, then I can't use that.
No, that part again, all that makes is just coffee. It doesn't make. There's two parts of the same machine.
No, the one.
Right.
Is just for
If you want to heat something up.
heating up milk.
So once an espresso,
Right, but it's being used for milk.
Right, but if you want just plain coffee, if you don't want to heat up, you say, give me just the concentrated coffee that you can get because that's not being steamed up. It's on the left side. If you want to add that to hot water, you take some of that stuff, add it to hot water. You haven't got anywhere near the whole stam. The whole stam is on the same machine because sometimes they go together, but they're not the same machine.
is the wand ever
Piece
used to fluff up anything treif?
It used.
No,
No. So if you're concerned about whole stam kalim, then no. But other what?
creamer.
And the cream tends to be kosher. It does cream also. The cream tends to be kosher. That depends on where you are.
Yeah, you got to tell him with the shot divider because he's about to go get it.
Okay, you can talk about the shots right after. Let me just finish up my Teavana. Okay, just for a minute. Now the Teavana is.
Whoa, it's not what Rabbi Schwartz said.
I started by telling you what Rabbi Schwartz said. That's where I started with Rabbi Schwartz. But okay, so now
Let me tell you what happened.
so the
Can't you put you up for this?
no, that's not. When the tape is off, I'll tell you what really happened. Okay. So now,
Say that Rabbi Schwartz doesn't agree with this.
so when I said Rabbi Schwartz, when we tear off the tape, I'll tell you more. Okay. The Teavana is a chain of stores, and instead of selling coffee, sells tea. The Teavana that I saw wasn't the same kind of a sit-down kind of place. You can come there, but I don't know if it's the same shadows of the Chacham Sadim of a place where you hang out and drink in the place. I don't know exactly how the stores work. But the shadows there, but the shadows are a little different. So let's put the Chacham Sadim on the side. That's how we came to this today, but put the Chacham Sadim on the side. But there's a few things. They have a zillion varieties of tea. Okay? A zillion. You can't imagine how many varieties they have. But what the good news is that they're very open to tell you what's in each blend. Okay, it's sitting on the canister. You go in there, in this store, you're supposed to come in there and buy leaves. Literally, they scoop them out for you. You buy the leaves to take them home and brew tea, or to brew it right there, to brew tea. So on each container, it tells you exactly what's in it. It says, this is called whatever a variety, and then it tells you all the ingredients in it. So the ingredients, the ones that are made with just plain dried out leaves, those are Peseder. Okay, but some of them, so those are the ones that you can actually use, but many of them have in them either flavors or all kinds of other things that are a little bit more sensitive. So if a person wanted to buy just leaves, they could do that as long as they're careful. As long as they look at each one of them and see what the ingredients are. These ones are better and these ones are worse. Okay? But they also at the store brew tea for you. They had tea sitting there waiting for a person to buy actually a cup that you could drink. And then they brew the tea the same equipment for all the different varieties.
So flavored teas also?
A lot of the teas have flavor in them, or other things in them. In the mix is already stuff. There's a flavoring mixed into the thing. So then so we have a shayla just of the fact that if I'm buying the already-made tea, how do I know what? Even if the variety that I'm buying happens to be all kosher, the already brewed, maybe it was brewed in kalim that were not kosher also. And Just an interesting thing to throw in. Just an interesting thing to throw in. When I was at that store, I was at a Teavana store. They showed me something. I feel bad that I didn't buy it, which was they said to me, "We have these mugs that we sell for people to make their tea in." They said, and these mugs, they're ceramic mugs, and they tell you should buy a different mug for each flavor. Mapatom. They said because if after you make a couple of cups of tea in this cup, if you put in water, it'll taste exactly like that tea already. And you don't have to put in more leaves into it. You put it in the cup. So therefore, if you get
off your loin glazed.
So I don't remember, but so the point was if you buy for 3 different flavors, you can all get mixed up flavors. You should buy separate ones. I didn't care about buying separate ones, but to me it was mamish. It was like a living example. We finally found the clear that it really is. Right? Wow, we have a clear. No, we don't have clears every place. To them it was like obvious. You put in water after a couple of times, you're going to taste the tea we're trying to make.